Good to see everybody. We're you enjoying the winter?
Would you please stand with me and bow your hearts? Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus, and we are thankful for life and for freedom and for peace. We're thankful we can gather and participate in citizen government. We are thankful for the great blessings we have enjoyed in our nation, Lord. And in this county, we're blessed above all peoples. And our desire is to manage that well and to preserve it and pass it on and see it spread on this earth. For we know that most of history is tyranny, and most of the world right now is tyranny. And you have blessed us, but freedom is always an endangered species. And so we gather to hear our state legislators. We gather to learn, Lord, and to pursue truth and wisdom. We ask your presence, your blessing, your guidance. We easily acknowledge you as God and sovereign. We thank you that you raised up this nation. We ask, Lord, that this nation come back to being a united nation under you with liberty and justice equally for all people. We thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Born and unborn.
You can be seated.
All right. For the sake of time, we're going to invite all the legislators up to the front, and if you grab a stool, and don't know if we counted right or not. If not, we can grab a chair. And the short guys sit on the tall stools, and the tall guys sit on the short stools. And I also have an extra microphone here. And why don't we start at this end with Ruben, and we'll go to the other side, introduce yourself. Time limits, just a short introduction, and maybe one thing that...
Politicians, you really got to put it in.
Exactly. And guys, I want to tell you, we're not from the government, and we're here to help you. Half of them got it. Okay, all right, here we go. Go ahead, Ruben.
Hello, everybody. Ruben Traver, House 52, north of town here. And I don't really have a speech prepared, but I am going to tell you, I'm a freshman. Me and Kim are both freshmen. And I'm going to give you an overtake of what happened when I first got down there. And I don't know if you guys know what happens when you first get down there, but you're overloaded with a lot of information really fast. And all they talk about is how many bills can we push through. Push. Bills, bills, bills. That's all they want to do. We don't talk about quality of bills. We don't talk about how we're going to help the state with these bills. It's all focused on how many we can mash through. That's the whole goal when we get down there. And we had this big surplus of money, and I'm thinking to myself, well, is there any way we can give some of this money back to the people? Well, I practically got thrown out on my head and beat up for even mentioning it. That's not the goal in our legislation. It's how we can tax more, spend more, and keep you guys working harder. And that's the whole goal right now. And it's sickening. I was very depressed, but by the time I got through the whole thing, I've met a lot of great people, and there is hope, folks. We live in a great state. The conservative crowd is growing. Look at everyone here tonight. You guys are paying attention. wyoleg.gov. It is the best tool you guys all have. You can get on there, you can look at all the bills, You can look at the digest, and that'll tell you how we all voted. You can look at the amendments that people put on to kill bills. I don't know if you've heard of the poison pills. Has anyone heard of that? Okay, they're amendments that they put on bills to destroy good bills. Okay, you guys have the power to go and look at all of this information. And please reach out. Not a lot of you have reached out to me. I got a lot of mass emails, and they're almost all the same. I really enjoy it when you guys reach out to me. Tell me who you are, what district you're in, and really what your concern is with the bill. I've gotten some calls since I got back. Why did you vote this way? Why did you vote that way? And then, honestly, I didn't know on some of the bills. I looked at my leadership, the people here I talked to, and some of them, maybe I made a mistake. I would love to hear from you guys, especially if there's some things that are really important to you. Please reach out to us. I think we would all agree, we want to hear from you. We want to do what's best for the people. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you all. I just want to say thank you all for all of your support over the years. It's great to be in front of you here tonight to just share with you what happened over the last couple of months. And Ruben did a great job of just sharing with you some of the things that have happened. I do want to point out some good things, though. And I noticed you guys had this banner made about election integrity. And how many of you have thought about or heard about or wondered about crossover voting in Wyoming? We eliminated crossover voting. A lot of that had to do with our Secretary of State. He was very involved with the process. But the Freedom Caucus, of which I'm the chair now, we really worked hard on the House side, and guys like McEwen made it happen on the Senate side too. In fact, that bill actually died in the Senate, and one of the senators, the majority floor leader over there, used a rarely used procedure to get it out of the grave, and they brought that bill back to life, and it actually ended up passing, and the governor did not sign it, but he let time lapse, and so it is law now. And so people have to declare what party they're going to be in before any of us declare that we're going to run for office. So that's a great thing. You can't have the Democrats changing on the day of the election, voting, and then changing back on their way out of the booth. So that has been fixed, and there's a whole list of things here, and we actually addressed all 5 of these issues in one way or another this particular session. So great that you guys are fighting for those things, but just let you know that the legislature is doing those things too. And it really is, the fact that we got Chuck Gray elected as Secretary of State had a huge impact on that stuff right there. He made those things as campaign promises, and we worked on them from our side. So a couple of things. We had 3 gun bills. Everybody's interested in their Second Amendment rights here, right? All 3 of those died. All 3 of those had to do with the Appropriations Committee in the House side. So you're going to hear that a lot. If you come tomorrow night to the town hall, we'll get into a lot more details. The Freedom Caucus, I don't know if you guys know what that is or not, but that is some very, very conservative legislators. I passed out some some material here that was compiled by Doug Gerard. And he's a statistical analysis kind of guy. And what he does, he grades legislators not based on the quality of the bill that they vote on or whether it's conservative or not, just how they vote with other legislators compared to other legislators. And so from that, he's able to determine who's the most conservative, who's the most liberal, and he puts everybody on that spectrum. And you can see how they chart it out. And I gave you some idea who's who in there. And on the back side, you can actually see. And if you have time, many of us are up here tonight. I should say that Abby Angelos is not here tonight. She wished she could be, and she appreciates your guys' support as well. She had to be down in Wright because they had a town hall meeting, or their town council meeting tonight, so she wishes she could be there. But anyway, we did have some success. The big thing for the Freedom Caucus is we really created a brand in the Freedom Caucus. One of the problems in the state of Wyoming is that we have the Republican Party and the Democrat Party hardly exists at all. So we have a lot of people that have left the Democrat Party and come into the Republican Party so they can get elected. Many of them have left the Democrat Party because they're just so crazy over there. And there have been, over the years in Wyoming, there's been some great conservative Democrats, but there's no room for them in the Democrat Party anymore. So now they're in the Republican Party, and it's really created this divide, but you, the voters, can't tell when you go to the polls, is this a conservative Republican, or is this a liberal or a moderate Republican? So the Freedom Caucus really gives you that differentiation. If a person's a member of the Freedom Caucus or says that they vote with the Freedom Caucus, you can see on that chart there's a huge difference between them and those that are not part of the Freedom Caucus. And that's what we're going to do for you as the voters. You're going to be able to look at a candidate and tell, are they my kind of candidate or not? And so that's what I worked hard on. Okay? Did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, you probably didn't get it on the recording because it wasn't on the mic right. But thank you all very much.
Well, good evening. Ken Clouston, House District 32. So I have 4J West, all in the city limits. Freshman legislator. It was exhausting, right? Like, you don't really know what you're getting into until you're in it. The first 2 weeks, I felt completely unorganized. There's just 14, 16 hours a day. You know, I read over 400 bills. We get 200 emails a day. There's a lot going on, a lot to learn. Like, I've been on the State Board of Education and the school board. I've ran my own company. So I have my areas that I'm used to. But then you start handling all these other things, from water rights to minerals to just other subjects that you've never been exposed to. So one of the great things about Gillette is every day I reached out to several people in the community. And it might have been the sheriff or the chief of police or the hospital CEO, members of our county commissioners, city council people. How does this affect Gillette? How does this affect Campbell County? And I felt really lucky that our community is still small enough that we can reach out to our associates and friends and get an idea of what's going on at home and how do you think this is going to affect us, right? So, John, and I mean, Mr. Knapp, Representative Knapp, really good conversations. Of our whole group, we have 5 representatives. We're all friends. My voting, according to Doug's, is definitely the most moderate. And, you know, we have 31 people who aren't Freedom Caucus Republicans. I think Doug rated me as 14th, kind of right in the middle there. One thing I don't do, you'll see this on the floor, some people chase ratings. You'll see them change their votes. And nobody in this room, but they want to appear more conservatives. Like, I even heard the Democrats say that, like, well, this bill's going to go through, so I'm going to vote no, so I appear more conservative. It's not something I do. How I vote is how I vote. And, you know, when somebody doesn't like it, Patty Junick, I heard from Patty pretty much every day. Her and I would have great email conversations, and it was really good. You know, Wyoming, it's our citizens that run this legislature, right? And it's citizens like this that are involved. If people aren't involved, no matter what your opinion is, people get away with things. So you know, when Ed asked me to come here tonight, I was thank you for inviting me, because you never learn anything from people who always agree with you, right? Like, I always want to know the other side of the issue, and I think one of my strengths is maybe I'm a good listener and I can help build consensus. You know, the other thing from being Campbell County is, you know, not being a member of the Freedom Caucus. If the Freedom Caucus doesn't take over leadership, I can tell you leadership on the other side is asked if I would chair either Labor and Health or chair Education if I get reelected. So I guess what I'm saying there is having all of our horses in one race isn't always good. But if current leadership would put me in a chair position, I'd feel good about that, because I could still really represent areas of Campbell County that I'm more of maybe of an expert in, especially with the education thing. I think that's really going to head. And you'll see some consistency in all my votes. I always want skin in the game. I did a lot of amendments where there were several school district programs where they wanted to give schools 100%, and that's not how I am. I said, if a school district wants $5,000, they need to put in $500, right? They need to have some skin in the game, that they're not just given everything. And I have a lot of other ideas like that for our school districts and for our state. So, and several of my amendments that I did was just trying to get people to have a buy-in and have some responsibility in the money that they're spending. So, But I'm honored to represent Campbell County and all of you and to be with this team. We really have a good team from Campbell County. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Ken, Patty Jennings on vacation.
Oh,
And
is that
then
why?
We'll be here.
Every time I come to one of these, I learn something. We can write amendments? Hi, I'm Troy McEwen, Senate District 24, and all my good friends in the Senate are here with me tonight that represent Campbell County. That's probably not funny, is it? This session was different than the other three. It was sort of a grind in a lot of ways, but we did get a lot of good things done, or some good things. We lost a few. We made some ground on property taxes. Did we get it through? No, unfortunately. But we did get a 17-14 vote to get rid of commercial property tax, personal property tax. We had a bill that we worked on to lower everybody's property tax 1%. So we're kind of trying to nibble at it a little at a time. We got the visitation bill passed. That was good. It was just an interesting session. I kind of feel bad for the freshmen this time. It seemed a little harder than it normally is. But hey, I want to thank everybody who has supported me, and it's been an interesting ride. I'm not ready to quit yet. And I do want to tell you, when I was in 2nd grade, I wanted to be a pirate. And I'll explain that later. We fought pretty hard on Chloe's Law, had some interesting comments. And I have had a lot of you get a hold of me directly with my email. Please keep it up. I really like it. Keeps me focused and straight. Sometimes it gets difficult when you're thinking, yeah, it's all old people and children. Please don't take that the wrong way. Every bill with money attached starts out with, it's the children and those poor old people. And the children are going to be fine. I'm a little concerned about the older people.
Amen.
They're having a tougher time as we go into this. So there's going to be a vote next time when we vote for president on a property tax relief. And it kind of got morphed. We bring up the poison pill. But it wasn't completely destroyed. What it does is it'll allow us to change the Constitution to have 4 classes of property. And that way we can do more with each class instead of, the way it's written now, everything has to be fair and equal and even. And I don't even know what that means. When you start talking a commercial tax, commercial property tax versus y'all's property tax. And this is a colorful saying I have. We not only go out and hang out around the mines and the oil fields and wait for the golden goose to lay the egg now. We're actually sticking our hand inside the goose to get the egg sooner. So they got to have some relief. We're hurting just as bad as some of those guys that voted 10 or 14% or 0. But once again, thank you, and I appreciate the chance to get to speak tonight. And I'll talk to you later.
Boy, only a pirate would talk about sticking his hand in a goose. Keep drinking. I'm Chris Knapp, and I'm House District 53, which is right in the center of town. Last year I served on TRW, which was Travel, Recreation, Wildlife. Ended up hitting 2 deer on the way home from committee meetings, so was kicked off of there. And so now I'm on Minerals, Vice Chair of Corporations. And one of the biggest things I learned this year is how powerful committees can be. You know, I used to be a commissioner. I used to be a county commissioner for about 12 years, and I always say it's easier to convince 3 people, or 2 people actually, to get the majority, than it is to convince that many legislators to get a majority. You know, there's over 60. So committees allow you the opportunity to truly convince other people to choose a route or not to choose a route. And so I'm very proud that we did get a lot of election law done this year in corporations. I'm also equally as proud that we crushed a lot of bills that were coming for elections. One of which is ranked choice voting, if you've heard of that. So committees are very, very important, and that's where you all can come in too, is giving that testimony about the Constitution. Because it's our job to educate, but it's also our job to learn as much as we can. We learn from experts, we learn from everyday citizens, we learn from the Constitution. And I, for one, that is one of the reasons I am in politics, is to defend the Constitution. And so I'm eager to see what my vote turns out to be. There are nuances with every bill. You know, you heard, for instance, the suicide hotline bill. That was a hot topic. And it touches all of us, right? But what you don't know sometimes is that the suicide hotline was paid for through 2025. So that gives us time to see if that is truly something that works. There's 12 other suicide hotlines nationwide, by the way, for anywhere from military to other aspects of our communities. But they tried to set up a trust fund, and one of the issues that we really brought up this year that I was proud of is we got the other side to say coffee cans, okay? Because what's important is you all have a savings account, you know, hopefully in a retirement account. And those are the ones that earn the highest interest that are important to you. The legislature has gotten used to, because we're both blessed and cursed with funds, is they've gotten to use coffee cans. These trust funds that sit out there with 50 million, 200 million for different projects. They get off the budget, they're funded in perpetuity, they earn the least amount of interest, and this is just standard procedure. So what we've tried to do is to gather those coffee cans up into coffee barrels, because what we say is senior in-home services doesn't have a coffee can. Mental health services does not have a coffee can. But all these special projects do. And if we took the top 15 priorities for Wyoming and funded those into the future through interest, we'd be a lot better off. So that's one of the directions that you'll see us take in the future. Thank you.
We're going to take a little time for questions. Any questions that you may have? Also with us tonight is Commissioner McCreary. We also would like to acknowledge him in the room. Anybody else I missed before we go on? Otherwise, Carol, you can take. Oh yes, we do. We have a couple library board members, Sage Bear and Charles Bend Your Head Butler. Yes, good to have you here. I know these guys a little bit, so it's good to see them in the room. All right, so we're going to let you ask questions. Carol's on this side. I'll be on this side with the microphone, and we will ask whatever and whoever you want.
Okay, I have a friend that that is his.
That's better.
Okay, I have a friend that has a son that's in the legislature. And so when a bill didn't pass or something, I would call her and talk to her. And then she would tell me what her son said. And he was a lawyer, and a lot of times he would say it wouldn't pass judicial, whatever. And so I'm wondering, when you put a bill through, or you know, a lot of those bills were, I thought, were pretty good. But who who looks at them first? Do you send them to your, is it iOS? LSO. Okay, so you send them there, so they're looked at by a lawyer, right? Before they go to committee?
They are, but they are bound to do what we tell them to do. So if we require them to cross a line that they are warning us about, they have to do it. So if we have an idea and a court has pushed back on that particular idea in the past, they're going to tell us that they pushed back on it. But there are three equal branches of the legislature. There's the legislature, the executive, and the judicial. So if the judicial has made a decision, and I take you to, well, there's Dred v. Scott. There's lots of bad decisions that the courts have made, and it's incumbent upon the legislature to keep pushing back. So sometimes we cross those lines because we believe it's that the courts have made a mistake. And so then it'll get before some attorneys and judiciary, and they'll determine that they don't want to do that, or the governor will say, we don't want to spend the money to put that through the courts. Things like that can kill a bill.
We had an example down there on the commercial personal property tax. The first words they told me was, it's unconstitutional. So I asked three of them, how do I make it constitutional? And they spent some time. There are some good people in LSO. And he came back and he said, let's write it as an exemption, and then we dodge the constitutional issue. So it's kind of the time you put into it, and if you have a good working relationship with some of them, they will help you out. There are, as John pointed out, legislatures that want to give everybody a pink unicorn. And not going to happen, but
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to say too, and is there any attorneys in the house? You know, we do have attorneys that serve in the legislature, and so we can't argue about the word knowingly for 3 hours or 4 hours or so. But one of the things that I've noticed, and it's very difficult to do because I understand it. I've worked with an architect before, and I can hear him yelling at contractors all day long, and that becomes part of your personality, whether you like it or not. But what happens down there sometimes is the Constitution is used both ways. It's used to kill a bill, and it's used to advance a bill. And attorneys, what I have found, unless they're very principle-driven, they every day have to argue a principle one way, one day for a client. And they have to argue that same principle on the opposite side on another day for a client. And what you end up having sometimes down there is more the ability to win than it is the ability to interpret the law based on principle in the Constitution. So it's very difficult. That's one of the most frustrating things that I find down there, is when arguments become almost to the point of ridiculous. When both sides are argued, whether it's one bill 1 second and one bill the next. Conservatives have one thing I think that always is a blessing to me, is principles stay the same. Principles always stay the same, and you'll see it bill after bill after bill after bill. There may be nuances, but that's one thing that I believe that we all share as conservatives.
I like that.
I had a question. Governor Gordon and former County Commissioner Rusty Bell have a plan to tax our energy production to pay for research and development of carbon sequestration. I was wondering if there might be a way to keep their hand out of the goose.
Oh, boy.
Well, we're a little late. We've got millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars that we've invested out at the ITC and into carbon sequestration. We even have a part of the University of Wyoming that is dedicated to trying to find different uses for coal, that type of thing. And so we're already taking our tax dollars, which are in this county and for the state. This county, it's 90% coming from the coal, oil, and gas industry. For the state, it's between 50 and 70%, depending on the year. But we're already doing that, and that is the governor says he's all of the above policy, but if you listen to his energy czar, it is green energy all the way. And so you'd have to change a lot of people in the butts and the seats. You got to change them down there to get away from that. So that's the direction the state is headed right now. I can tell you, there's a lot of funding that went into this supplemental budget. We spent $525 million on top of the 2-year budget we'd already had. So we had $2 billion of surplus because the price of natural gas was at $50. Today it's at $2.50. So that money's gone. Also, we had ARPA money left over. We had increase in our property taxes. So we had a lot of money, $2 billion in surplus. We put $1.4 billion of that into savings, about half of that into the long-term savings. It has the good interest rate. So that's a good thing, but it only generates about $65 million per year, all that money we put into savings. At the same time, that $525 million, it has $112 million that is ongoing spending. So to offset the $65 million of new revenue from savings, we spent $112 million. So we're upside down $47 million every single year as of the budget that we just passed in this last session. So there's a lot, you put that on top of what the senator just said about taxation. We didn't provide any real significant taxation relief. That bill that he was talking about that creates a 4th class, that is window dressing, folks. It will not change your tax bill. All it does is it puts the residential portion, takes it away from commercial. Well, what happens when you raise taxes on commercial? They pass it right through to you. So the same people that are paying taxes on their houses are going to pay the taxes for the commercial. That's why in the state it was 3 particular classes, and they combined commercial and residential because they knew the same people were going to be paying those taxes. So now we're dividing it out because the business owners that have commercial, they don't have as many votes as all the people with residential. So we're going after votes instead of going after doing what's the right thing for the people. We've created this new section, if you all vote for it in the next election. That's all we did, we just put it on the ballot. But if we get this other classification, those taxes could go up or down. There's no determination based on what we passed this time. Now, we tried in the Freedom Caucus over and over and over to put a cap in there so that your assessment, your annual assessment, could not go up more than a particular percentage. That would have been real reform, but it failed every single time. And, if you want to know which amendments those were that had the cap, or the bills that had the cap in it that were also defeated, I'll be happy to share those with you. I'll have all that information with me tonight, and I also have it tomorrow night at the town hall. But we really proved that we have a tax and spend legislature right now. We're taxing you and the mineral industry, and we're not giving it back when we've got more than we know what to do with. And we're spending it when we do have more than we know what to do with. So that's the bottom line, folks, it's window dressing. You're going to hear all kinds of bragging about we put $1.4 million into savings, but the reality is we're overspending by $47 million per year just as of this last budget.
There is some good news. Really? The Senate Revenue Committee is about as conservative as it gets. We're pretty ornery. We went after a lot of spending and we got rid of it. We also won the hearts and minds of 3 of the representatives, maybe 4. And if we can carry 8 votes through the interim, we have a chance to really put forward some good legislation. And then you can all watch everybody scatter, like, I won't use that word, but I won't. They'll try to stay away from it. Leah made a great point. Sometimes you get those bills put in front of you, and you're like, I gotta vote no on this, but I want to crawl under my desk while I do it, because people don't understand. And Chris brought up a good point about waiting to see if the suicide hotline bill's gonna work and that it's financed. It's already financed. One of my biggest frustrations and why I think this session was a grind, it was a legislative session. It was not a budget session. We spent more energy on the budget than helping people, in my opinion. And we'll go back down there during the budget session and we'll have to have 2/3 vote to get things brought up in the House and the Senate. But that's one of the drawbacks of what I thought we did. We spent more time working on a budget and we created a larger budget than we've ever had, and some of it's permanent. Well, has anybody lived here for a while? What's going to happen with coal, oil, and gas eventually? It's going to dip. I don't want to stand here like a soothsayer, but that's what we do. And now we got a permanent budget problem.
I'm going to talk about Chris's buckets a little bit because I'm a little bit excited about this. We have a representative from Casper who's an accountant, Representative Obermueller, and he's got a plan to take away some of these buckets that a lot of us signed on for. And I think you're going to see some change there that we're all pretty excited from. I think the old guard that's been in there for a long time has the way of doing it. They've done it. But I think we got a better way coming. I will tell you about some of the spending that Representative Bear was talking about. You know, a lot of that money is going towards school finance and school capital construction. So there's 70-some million of ongoing funds. And I will tell you, the speaker's thought there is, you know, there's a lawsuit coming up. And this kind of takes some of the legs out of that lawsuit a little bit. And for those of you who don't, know Speaker Summers, I think he's a good guy. He's a good legislator. His sister and he, neither one have children, and they have a homestead ranch in Pinedale they have 1880s water rights. They gifted their ranch to the neighbors because the neighbors have, a few kids, and dividing the ranch up, the family ranch, the homestead, the neighbor ranch, really wasn't enough for all three of those boys to manage. So just the thought of this beautiful ranch, they would rather give the ranch to their neighbors that homesteaded with them way back in the late 1800s than selling it to somebody who's just going to not appreciate the land. So there was just one thing about Speaker Summers that I guess really moved me. I don't know how many people would gift their family ranch to the neighbor, but that's one of the most moving things that I think of the whole session, a story that I heard.
So going back to your original question about the minerals, because I'm a pretty hopeful person and I like to look at the positive things that we're doing. We did, thanks to Representative Hallinan last year, we did reduce severance taxes for the mines. The property tax question to me to be solved, and we did do a study this year. Everybody voted for the study, and that will address valuation versus the taxation. And the valuation is an important piece of property taxes because you all know this happened to Jackson, through Cody, through Sheridan. When people move into the state and they start buying ranches at double their value for people around you too because of the valuation. And so there's a study that has been passed that will address that issue and look at that issue because to me it is a valuation issue. That starts raising those taxes for people, especially people that have lived here 30, 40 years in some cases, and their property value just keeps rising, and this would base it off the sale. So if you bought it 40 years ago, it's at that rate or that price. If you paid double for a ranch, 10 million, then you're going to be one of the ones that gets that increase because you're creating it almost. And for minerals, I like to look at it as a revenue way out because Wyoming has the resources. We have the resources. The nation needs the resources. So whether it's coal, wind, gas, now nuclear is involved, we can export that energy instead of commodities. And we need to look at transmission lines more than we ever have. We need to look at the grid and the way it's set up and the way it's going to be rebuilt into regions more than we ever have. And in working with other states to become a regional energy power. That's my vision for the future. I did propose one bill this year that will go into interim, which is when the federal government comes to Wyoming to purchase land, you've heard the 30 by 30, that Wyoming gets the first right of refusal from that landowner to give us the option of matching the offer or negotiating with the rancher. And ultimately, they have the final say, but I would hope that Wyoming owners of land would sell to Wyoming versus the federal government. So that'll be looked at as kind of an overview to look at possibly trading for minerals at some point, land use plans, access easements, all the different things that are issues in Wyoming, hopefully will come together through that study.
Hold it away.
Away.
Yeah.
You
It'll
should
pop.
tell me to get up.
I know, that's a different one.
Okay, Janet Bader, I appreciate you guys. My question's on the charter schools. Charter schools have been locked down real tight. I'm a school choice person, homeschool, private school, charter school. I thought that we were opening things up, and I lost complete track of what was going on. Can you explain where we are at with charter schools now? And so,
We
anyway.
lost track too, we don't know.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna get track.
I kept a close track on it, because that was kind of my job, to track these bills, and, you know, Ruben talked about how fast it's coming, and Leah did too. One of the things that we do in the Freedom Caucus is we have a full-time staff attorney that just works for us, and we're reviewing these bills and these amendments immediately. We're putting text messages out and giving everybody an idea. This is where the Freedom Caucus stands, and they can choose to vote however they want, but it sure helps when you got somebody saying, well, this is how we're going to vote. We were very highly criticized for that, but one of the things that I was tracking was our school choice. So one thing that did get through was a good bill that helped with homeschooling. HB 70 opened up the definition of homeschooling, so now you can co-op with other parents. It doesn't have to be the exact family, so that was a good one. We tried to get, one of the biggest bills was an ESA bill, a real school choice bill where the money followed the student. So it was funding the student, not the particular program. That one really struggled. It got through the Senate, and then the Speaker Summers that was just mentioned here with the ranch, he does not like anything outside of public school, and so he was not letting that come out. The same thing basically happened with the charter school bill. He would not let it out. Now, we, as a Freedom Caucus, often challenged him at the end of the session. We let him make the decisions throughout the session, giving him the opportunity to do the right thing. Toward the end of the session, we had to at least try to get those things out of his desk or out of the committee that he assigned him to that we knew would kill them, that type of thing. So the school choice bill, that was the backpack funding that followed the student, an attempt was made to pull that out, and that failed. Another attempt was well, here's what happened on the charter school bill. And that bill made it through the Senate, got to the Speaker of the House. He was holding on to it, did not want to let it out. Megan Degenfelder is our new superintendent of education, and Ogden Driscoll, who represents Weston and Crook and his district in the northern part of Campbell, like him or not, he brought the bill. So it was his bill to try to expand charter schools from the 3 that we got passed last year, which are already taken up, those 3 are going, to unlimited. That's what the bill did initially. So Driscoll and Megan Degenfelder went in to talk to the speaker and try to get that bill out. And they negotiated, and I'm going to tell you what they negotiated it down to. But I promised that the Freedom Caucus would not get in the middle of that and let it, that way they could get something out, okay? Or we would have tried to jerk that out, but we didn't have the votes to get it out anyway. So here's what happened. Now there's one potential charter school and a moratorium on that. So really there's huge hoops to get a charter school out now. But it changed, the bill changed how we selected. We, last year, made it so that it was the SLIB board, because it used to be just your local school boards, and school boards were, you know, highly influenced by the administrators, and they were not interested in passing these charter schools. So we moved it to the SLIB board, we got those 3 passed. This was going to, and is going to create a new board. We made several amendment attempts to get the guy from the University of Wyoming off of there, because we knew he was not going to be very friendly to charter schools, and we failed at that. So right now, the board that's going to make these decisions is kind of messy. And we're very restricted now. But the speaker also admitted that he's only going to be there for 2 years, and he knows that this is happening. I mean, it blew up on him. We went national on the news. He gave Wyoming basically a black eye for not moving forward on school choice, because this is a national movement, folks. People have decided that school choice is the way. You create competition, competition leads to excellence. And here's the fact of the matter. This is one of the things public schools are often fearful of. They don't want to lose their ADM, that's their average daily membership. They're afraid of all the kids going to the charter schools or all the kids going to homeschool. The reality is, when polled, 44%, and this happened in Arizona, so that's where the numbers are coming from, 44% of parents want the choice. But when it really comes down to it, you know, they start thinking, well, my kids are in football or at this school, and I'm going to have to drive them over to the charter school, and they can get on the bus here. In the end, 3%. 3% actually take people up on the charter school choice. So it's not going to, we're always going to have public schools. Public schools are going to more than likely always educate the vast majority. But having a little pressure on them to create excellence, that cannot be bad. And that's what we were trying to do with these charter schools, with the homeschooling. And hopefully we'll keep coming back with that ESA, that's the Education Savings Account. There's a lot of throwing around of the unconstitutional word from the attorneys on this, but here's the reality. The Blaine Amendment, which says you cannot take state dollars and put them into religious schools and things like that, that has been overturned by the Supreme Court in Montana and one other state, I can't remember where, but we have that amendment in our Constitution. It is not constitutional. So that is going away. We just need to keep pushing. And this is back to your question. You know, when we go to LSO and we say we're going to write an ESA bill, they're saying, well, it's unconstitutional in the Wyoming Constitution. And we have to say, well, the Blaine Amendment's been overturned. We're going to ignore what you're saying about that. But when they put that stamp on the bill that this is unconstitutional, a lot of legislators are going to go with that, and they're going to vote against it. So it's an uphill battle, and you have to really educate a lot of legislators and a lot of people. We had a school choice bill, well, a homeschool bill 3 years ago that the homeschoolers didn't want anything to do with. They killed the bill. So, you know, sometimes, you know, it's educating the people bringing the bill. Sometimes it's educating the people out there that are going to be affected by the bill. But there's a lot of educating that has to go on. So I hope I answered your question about that.
And I would say Wyoming has had the best homeschool legislation, because I'm supposed to know. Since Wyoming did their first homeschool legislation, it's been the best in the nation, and I just tell you guys to leave that thing alone. It was good that you opened it up, because I know how it got there, and now you can open up.
Yeah, I think everybody that wanted to change homeschooling learned their lesson 3 years ago.
Exactly.
And now it's very targeted, and everybody checks with the homeschoolers to see, is this going to work or not? So
Right.
I think we learned our lesson.
Both of those bills came through my education committee, so I've got the whole history from the committee side at least. So the homeschool, I was very supportive of that. We had great discussion. I'm glad that went through. So I think you're going to see a lot. You know, this way you could have multiple teachers from different families teaching specialties, right? Otherwise, you're having somebody in that own family trying to be good at everything. And I can tell you when my son was ill, I could teach him history and English and science, but I could not teach him new math, right? I needed help with that. So I still think it's, anyway, I'll leave that one alone. As far as charter schools, I met with Superintendent Megan Degenfelder for hours on that, and I was a little bit of the swing vote, you know, and I don't know if you know Ogden, but Ogden can be pretty persistent on trying to get you to change your vote. And finally, he said, Ken, you've got a spine, because my 2 points were, if this is public money, I wanted the teachers certified, like any other public teacher. And I wanted them to have some of the same standards that other public schools do. So if they're gonna take public money, I wanted them to meet some of the same public requirements in those schools. And then once that happened, then I was the swing vote, and then it went through committee and off we went. So I think the process worked well. So the 3 charter schools have been approved. The increased cost, because now we're gonna have more schools, more administrators, right? We're gonna look at about $14 million as the estimate to add those 3 schools that are gonna be coming on board. So the thought was, let's study these new charter schools and see what it really costs before we open the floodgates to all of them. You know, the other testimony that we heard is across the nation, in 5 years, 50% of charter schools fail. So how much money do we want to invest as Wyoming? You know, we have a large spaces and not that many people, so our costs per school go up because it's just, there's a lot of distance between schools, and we try to provide all these things in these small schools. So you can look at up in Sheridan, they have 3 school districts for that county, and 2 of those school districts can see each other, right? And one school district spends $15,000 per student, the other one's around $30,000 per student, just because of the size of scale of those schools. So I'll be really interested in the next few years how those charter schools do.
Did you guys study Snowy Range Academy in Laramie? I'm familiar with that. Did it cost the state money? I mean, that's, my grandson was in there. That's an incredible school.
Yeah, you know, right now we have 4 charter schools that are up and running, and then we'll have the 3 approved, and we'll have 1 more coming, so we'll have 8 charter schools in Wyoming. Yeah, and then some of the estimates for the 3 schools coming on costing $14 million, they looked at what the 4 current schools are costing us, so.
Okay, I've got a question. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but Utah just passed, I think it was HB 425, where if they shut down these coal-fired plants, they passed a law that says the government's not to just take and put it into scrap metal, where they put it on pause. So if the wind and all that other crap that they're doing, that isn't gonna work, fails, that they don't have to take, and rebuild the wheel on these plants. Are you guys aware of that? Are you guys looking into that to find out that happens here like they did in Utah? Because they send power to California, a whole bunch of stuff. So are you guys looking at that? Where are we at with that here in Wyoming?
Yeah, we have done some similar things, but mothball is the word you're looking for, and this is what happened in Europe. Many of the European nations mothballed them, and this winter they took them out of mothballs because they didn't have a way, since Russia cut them off on natural gas, they didn't have a way to keep their homes warm, so they refired up those coal-fired power plants. We don't have a bill that will actually force a mothball situation. What we have is if a power company is going to shut down a coal-fired power plant, they have got to search out buyers for that plant. That's the first thing that they have to do, and that's really the stopgap that we have right now. Now, we have fought long and hard for things like the Public Service Commission to deny the ability for them to close down those plants. And 2 years ago, ran into that. One of the legislators from this area killed that amendment that would have forced the Public Service Commission to not allow coal-fired power plants to be shut down, just because Colorado or California wants to shut it down. Unfortunately, 78% of the power that we generate is exported out of state. And they are determining, those other states are determining how our power is going to be generated. And I don't know if you guys realize this, but last December, during that cold snap, we were very close to having rolling blackouts in the state of Wyoming. We got all this power, way more than we need, but we were going to have rolling blackouts. And that's what's going to happen. I brought a bill The speaker didn't like the bill, so it never came out. But it was to create a commission that would look at things like, you've heard of the sabotage that's happened back east on some of these power distribution areas. Look at anything that might cause our reliability to go down, whether it's the way we're generating it, how we're dealing with the temperatures and the loads, keeping a certain base load. We need to start doing something to prepare, because we're continuing to allow our power companies to dictate based on what their customers in other states are telling them exactly how we're going to generate this power. That's the nuclear power plant in Kemmerer. I'm all for nuclear power, but I'm not for nuclear power at the expense of coal. So we've got to start looking at this in a different way, and right now we don't have the kind of leadership that's going to allow us to really.
I would take a look at that though, just see how they did it. They
Yeah.
got passed.
I've had that suggestion, and I'm looking at
It's
that.
425
There's also
easy.
another issue with these different types of power. A windmill puts out 2 to 3 megawatts. Well, if you ever had a physics class or an electrical engineering class, you can't push 3 megawatts very far. It's just like everything else, it's not as efficient. So you got these windmills putting out 2 to 3 megawatts compared to a coal-fired plant putting out millions. That's how we get the energy to Colorado and other states. We really will have a hard time selling green energy because we're not going to get it there. And I think Representative Knapp brought up an excellent point earlier. The problem isn't the power source, it's the transmission lines. And until we fix that,
How bad are the transmission lines here? I know they're doing that gateway, whatever, north and south or whatever, but that's on the northwest corner of Wyoming. How's the rest of the grid? Does that all have to be upgraded for the transmission?
It needs to be hardened.
it needs to be hardened. And the other thing is, what I guess I'm trying to say, is when you push power, it's like water through a hose. And if you're only putting out a little bit of water, it doesn't matter how big size the hose is, it's not efficient. And it doesn't go very far. As opposed to if you pump it through a huge line and you got a lot of power behind it, it's going to go farther. You ever played with a hose in your backyard when you were a kid?
Still do.
You start pulling it up, eventually you get to 45 degrees. And then the water starts coming back at you. It can only go so far. And if your neighbor has a bigger, better hose or more water pressure, his 45-degree point's going to be different. So when we start talking green energy, it's funny how the proponents don't tell you about some of the real problems with it. Thank you.
So what's with the field?
We're about 15 minutes left, just to let y'all know.
What about the field and the windmill that I pass by in 59 every time? So they're not doing anything?
They are. They're generating a small amount. They're actually creating problems at places like Dry Fork, because when they come online, Dry Fork has to slow down. And, you know, bearings and turbines work much better at a constant state. So having to shut it down during the day or whatever the wind's blowing and then fire it back up is really wearing out Dry Fork a lot faster than it would have otherwise. Back to your question. I think it's important that everybody here know about a bill that passed both chambers, okay? Our neighbors to the east, Niobrara, has a new wind farm that's supposedly going in, and it's going to be about 60% on private land and 40% on state land. But they didn't go to the private landowners, they went to the state first. And so their intention is clearly to use eminent domain to get the land. And not only the land for the wind turbines on the private land, but also the transmission lines to take it to a hydrogen hub over in that area that they're getting ready to build. So this passed the House and the Senate, a bill that would have forbid them from using eminent domain. And it gave us, I think, another 5 years on a law that we passed in the past. It had sunsetted, and we lost that eminent domain protection. That bill was vetoed by the governor. So these these green power companies are getting a preference from the governor over the landowners in Niobrara County.
How did he win as a Republican?
67% of the vote.
That crossover voting is why we have that Democrat in there. It's disgusting.
And I think, you know, I'm one that's tired of playing the victim in Wyoming. You know, I think we dropped the ball 15, 20 years ago, actually, where the narrative started to be told that somehow this energy, which is the cheapest, the most abundant, the most flexible, is the worst. And finances started going another way. So Ruben and I sit in minerals, on the minerals committee, and we start seeing a lot of ESG happening where banks are no longer funding fossil fuels. So we're fighting against that. We're fighting against education, which comes down to each one of us to not stand for that anymore. We did have a bill that passed. I co-sponsored this year a bill that basically, you remember the ports, when the ports wouldn't ship Wyoming coal. That didn't make it to the Supreme Court. However, we did expand that budget for the governor to be able to intervene, sue, because what's happening across the nation now is you're seeing early closures. So they're ramping up closures of coal-fired power plants all across the nation with no good reasons. You can read the studies on them of why they do it. So we now have the ability for him to at least intervene in those instances and have Wyoming be have standing in those.
So I want to, before we wrap this up, and this has been a passion of mine for several years, and this idea, and I've got 3 topics I want to talk about passionately. One is carbon sequestration. What the heck do plants like? They like carbon, okay? And we're talking
Greenhouse gas is greenhouse gas because it makes the world greener. That's why it's called greenhouse gas.
Yes, exactly. So we're trying to get rid of this stuff when it does the plants and the atmosphere good. Go on to NOAA. What is the National Weather Service website? And you look at carbon content in our atmosphere in North America. It's at the lowest rate it's been in centuries, people.
Right.
And we're trying to kill power plants. Okay, and John, you said a few minutes ago, when they turn up those turbines, they have to cut back the power plant. So take an engine, run it with no load at 3,000 RPM, it wears out faster. Put it under load at 3,000 RPMs, it lasts forever.
That's how they were designed.
That's how they were designed, people. So these power plants, they're not shutting down when the solar cells are producing electricity. These power plants are not shutting down when they're producing wind electricity. They have to keep them running so that when the solar cell or the solar and windmills are not running. So then they have to come back up again. So we're paying twice for our electricity, people. We're paying twice.
Not nice.
Well, it's more than
A
that.
lot of our tax money goes to put those
To
stupid.
put those things up, okay? I'm not against wind or solar. I'm not against it. But let's move into it when it becomes economically feasible. And people, we gotta quit being stupid about this stuff and bring the truth to the people.
Well, we gotta have leadership in Wyoming, for starters, which we
Right.
do not have a leader. We have a follower.
Right.
So it trickles down from there. And I'm just a freshman, but I can see that.
Okay.
Pretty apparent.
Leah?
Well, I was just gonna say, Germany, right, they turned their coal-fired power plants back on because they quit using them, they got dependent on natural gas. And when that went away and they're hurting and freezing and their costs go up, they turned back to coal. Japan, right, they were using nuclear energy and they had the meltdown. And now what are they doing? They're turning back to coal because it's reliable and it's safe, right?
Yeah.
You know what, my son and I got to meet with one of the, basically the Department of Energy head from China. And he said, you Americans, what are you doing? He said, we build a new coal-fired power plant every month. If you want to do something for the environment, ship us your clean coal. Because we're not going to spend the money putting on these filters that you do in the United States. And we're going to keep burning our dirty coal.
We
So,
have a worldwide market for
yes,
what they call, what is it, thermal coal?
thermal clean, but it's
It's
the
clean.
lowest sulfur
Right.
coal in the world, right? And all they're doing now is they're getting their coal from other places that aren't clean. And they're not going to spend the money cleaning the air. So if we want to really help the environment, what this country needs to do is burn clean coal and ship it. And we have it, right? But this country's going to hurt. Like, our costs are going to go up, and we're going to have blackouts, and people are going to be cold, or they're not going to have their air conditioners, they're hot, because we don't have the energy because they're shutting down our coal. So.
We can't let them do that. Leah's got a question also, but just another thing to add to this. I have a nephew that works for Jim Bridger Power Plant in Rock Springs. Talking to him a few weeks ago, he says, Uncle Lyle, they're not shutting these power plants down. They can't. It takes big power to push little power. And that's true. He works there and he knows that. So this garbage they're feeding us, it's not true, people. It's not true. And we're going to get ourselves into a real big jam if we allow this stuff to happen. My wife and I are going to be installing a natural gas generator in our house this year because we're going to start having brownouts if they pull this garbage off. I'm telling you that. You better get ready too, because it's going to happen.
Well, and I just had one last thing to say about it, because I know this group finds this at the core of everything. It's about freedom. This was one of the first freedoms they took away from us, is the ability to choose our own energy source. And people say, well, government should put their thumb on it. Well, it has been. That's why we're in the mess we're in. And it's with every single part of our lives. If you really look at it, this year's been I think one of our jobs is to shine a light on the state government. That's one of our jobs. But this year, you've seen a light shown on national government, national policies, and you can see how every single freedom of ours is being eroded, how the Constitution is being destroyed before our very eyes, how people don't have identity anymore. People don't have those principles to fall back to. They would like to see the Constitution eradicated. And so it's our job at the state level, because believe me, it doesn't end at the federal government. It's about power, it's about money, and every single decision that's made either strips you of a constitutional right or lessens it. And that's one of our jobs down there, is to make sure that we continue to live free.
I'd like to add one thing at the end here. I wanted to make sure that everybody had good news sources. So how many of you have a good conservative state news source? Yeah, one person back there. So I want to just tell you guys about a few different sources. First of all, there's a blog called Cowboy State Politics. Okay, that's David Iverson over in Buffalo. He really, what's that? Podcast, what did I say? A blog. Podcast, yeah, that's right. Cowboy State Politics. Another one is the Conservative Chronicle. For those of you who like to have a paper, an actual physical newspaper, the Conservative Chronicle. And then right here, he's a moderate himself, but he lets a lot of us conservatives go on and talk, and that's Vic Wright on the radio. His morning show is a good source for conservative news. So there's a few out there, and I can, if you want to know from for the rest of the Wyoming media, from most conservative to least conservative, come see me and I'll share that with you. Right. Thank you guys. Thank you all.
Let's thank our legislators. And also up on the screen, we're having a